Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Business of Art, the podcast that demystifies business for artists. And today on the show, I have Patrick Adams. Patrick is a book architect who specializes in helping people bring children's books and books into the world. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that I have a new book on Kickstarter right now called Pixie Dust. Pixie Dust is about a pixie monster hunter that gets betrayed, murdered, sells her soul to the queen of the underworld, and comes back as a zombie to seek revenge on the king that killed her. Check it out today at pixiedustcomic.com, and you can pick up a free chapter on that page as well. My books are basically what fund all the other stuff that I do, including this show, so please head on over to Pixie Dust Comic today and check it out. Additionally, my nonfiction book, Sell Your Soul, How to Build Your Creative Career, is on Amazon. And it's on Amazon Unlimited even at GoSellYourSoul.com. So you can read it for free today and through November before I take it down from the Amazon exclusive program. All right, now let's get on with the show. Take it away, Patrick. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
So, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor. What I'm most passionate about right now is helping other authors. They, especially children's book authors. You know, that's the first several books that I've put out are all children's books, and you know, going through the first one is intimidating because what I think you find with most authors or prospective authors, is that they have a story, and the story, you know, might be in you know, as complete a format. They might have had it edited, but to take it from a text story to a children's book is quite a process. And for me, that was a real learning experience as I went through putting my first one together. And, you know, it's a lot of trial and error. If you want to, you know, do it on your own, or if you want to try and put it in front of a publisher, you got so many things to think about and a lot of decisions to make. So as, you know, I went through this process several times and got used to the different elements of putting it together. You know, I joined Facebook groups and stuff like that, and got a sense of, you know, different people at various stages of their creative process with it. And I just got to the point where I said, you know what, I know this well enough that I can start to help others. And I just actually published my first client's book. It's called Chocolate Milk. The author is Alexandria Rizek. I met her on Twitter, and she had just that. She had written a story. It was a cute story, an anti-bullying story, and she just sent me the text. And as I looked at it, I was able to, you know, just knowing how I put my books together, sort of pull the story apart and kind of think through the illustrations and stuff like that. But the whole way through the process, you know, I was educating her on it and so forth. And you know, that was a really good feeling. You know, it's as good as it is to see your own work come to life. To help somebody else is about an equal feeling there.
I agree with that. So could you talk a little bit about the process from beginning to end when you get a script until it's through publication?
Sure. So, you know, I think of it at the very beginning from a foundational basis, and, you know, what are some of the just general requirements for a children's book? So that's where you have your first options. You can either try and submit this to a regular publishing company, or you can self-publish. So, you know, for somebody who's never been through the process, that's something to consider. And so if they go the self-publishing route, which is where I really that's the field I play in, then what I do is I'll take the story, and depending on the length, and there does have to be a certain length, because if you go through a platform like CreateSpace, you know, there's typically a minimum page requirement. So as I worked with Alexandria on her book, I was able to take her story and break it out into essentially 20 pages. And I start with 20 because, you know, you have your page where you're going to have your copyright information. You have a dedication page. You have an about the author and an about an illustrator page. So you've got your 4 extra pages built in there. So the story to me needs to be about 20 pages long. And as I look at the text, you know, I would try and say, okay, what makes a logical illustration here? And that's where, you have another choice. How do you want your illustrations? So if you want like a half-page illustration accompanied by text, which is what I'd recommend, because children's books, inherently they're more picture-driven than text-driven, and the more pictures you have, the better. You have to decide: do I want a half-page illustration? Do I want a whole-page illustration with the text on the next page? So as I work to split the story apart, that's the first question I'll ask. How would you prefer to have this book structured? So if they choose the half-page illustration with text option, which I'd recommend, then it's my challenge to then pull apart 20 logical illustrations. And so the next consideration there is illustrators. So there's a lot to consider where that's going to be your probably biggest expense as it relates to the book. And you could go to Fiverr, you can seek out people on Facebook, on Twitter. There's no shortage of people who are going to be potential illustrators. And you've got to understand, I guess, what it is you're looking for and be patient as you select one. And, obviously, looking at their portfolio and things like that, understanding their style, making sure it's going to be a fit, even asking for a sample is not out of the realm of making this decision. So with my client, I actually, one of the illustrators that I work with, I was able to represent him for her. And, he did some sample drawings for her characters in her book, which are cows. And she loved it. So, I was able to also provide the illustrator for her. So as I worked through this process with her, the illustrations, it came, like 5 at a time. I would, format it into the book. And that was another big piece of this whole process, was actually learning the book formatting. With my first book, I paid for all of that. I paid for the illustrator. I paid for the book formatting. I paid to have an ebook created. So I just didn't know how to do any of it. So one of the biggest things that I dedicated myself to learning was how to do all that, so that I could be that resource for writers. So sort of making myself almost a one-stop shop here. So as we proceeded through the book and I got the illustrations in, I was able to, start essentially the version of her book that would become the final one. And, just kind of shared it with her as it went along, making sure she was okay with it and stuff like that. And we eventually got to 20 illustrations. And I could see as we rolled through this process how excited she was getting at seeing this story, which she wrote actually when she was in high school, really come to life with illustrations and things like that.
Cool. And how long did that process take?
So this probably about a month and a half to 2 months total, which, up front I let her know the illustrations were going to be the longest haul in this. And, while we were doing that, I was having her work on, okay, think about what you want to say as, about an author. Think about your dedications. Think about, where do you want this? Do you want an ebook? So we were able to sort of, while the illustrations were being done, knock out the other elements of it. And also during this process, things that, you find out, maybe but don't necessarily think about as you go into a book, getting it copyrighted, getting an ISBN number, things like that. So I bought myself a stock of ISBNs, about a year ago, just to have them for my own use. But I was able to, have a supply of those. So I was able to get her ISBN for both her paperback book and her ebook. And then she worked on, getting her sort of description of herself, her inspiration for her book, all those kind of things in place while we waited for the illustrations. And then another big consideration for her was, okay, the front cover. And so that I always kind of keep that illustration for last, because you get the rest of the book into place, you develop the characters, you kind of have their personalities come out, and then you want the front cover of the book to just be spectacular. And so I really worked with her on, how do you want this to appear? What sort of, to the point where how do you want the title to appear? Is there a specific font? Is there a specific design? Things like that.
Cool. And when did this book launch?
So it was actually released on the 25th.
And how did you plan? Did you plan the book release for her, or could you talk a little bit about how you plan the release of one of these children's books?
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's two different considerations here. So, as I said, I worked with her on this one through CreateSpace. And so I love CreateSpace because it's free to put a book on there. There's other options. Ingram Spark is another one. And sometimes they run promotions where you can do it for free, but typically there's a cost for putting the book on there. So just a matter of personal preference. I think they both probably have their different qualities. With Ingram Spark, you can get hardcover books, which you can't with CreateSpace. So there's give and takes, and it kind of depends on what you want. But I love CreateSpace, and I'm used to how they work, and I love the books automatically being available across the world, wherever there's an Amazon store in a country. I think with the sole exception of China, which is crazy, your book's going to be available in just several countries around the world. So I worked with her on the CreateSpace setup, and having, like I said, gone through this process many times with my books, I know exactly what CreateSpace will kick back as it relates to illustrations. So that's become a clean part of this process for me. So as I was putting this book together, I knew exactly, where the margin cutoffs were, how to deal with bleed, how to place the text so that there's not any conflict when CreateSpace reviews it to give it the okay for, eventual mass printing. So I got that into place set up the project, got her all the way up to the proof approval process, which that's where you have your book is set, your cover is set, it's been reviewed. CreateSpace hasn't found any issues that are going to stop the printing of the book. So now it's up to the author to review their book in detail and make sure that this is the version that they are comfortable with getting out to the public. So I got her to that point. And once the proof review is done, as soon as you say, yes, I'm good with this proof, your book is going to be available. Sometimes it takes CreateSpace a couple of days to get it out on the Amazon sites, but it's available immediately in the CreateSpace store. So as I found out when Alexandria wanted her book to be released, and I asked her, is there a specific date you want to target? We tried to kind of work backwards and make everything happen so that it would be available when she needed it to. The other thing that we set up was the ebook. Now, ebook process, which I haven't really gotten into yet, that was probably the most complicated thing for me to learn. That, with my first couple of books, the way the illustrator did the illustrations was it spread over 2 pages. So, and the illustrations were fantastic, but that made it really hard to convert to ebook. And so without knowing a thing about it, I kind of left it in others' hands to do for me for the first few books. And then I found this program called Calibre. And Calibre is this software that you can download. It's free. You can download, and it's like an ebook reader. But more than that, it's an ebook editor. So it allows you to upload a PDF file. And from that PDF, you can create an EPUB file or a MOBI file, which is what Kindle Direct Publishing or Draft to Digital or any of these companies that will host the ebook, that's the format they're going to need it in. And so the hard part comes in is understanding how to format a book in, let's just say, EPUB format, because EPUB can convert to MOBI as well. So that was hard. And so I found a couple of different programs that I have to kind of use right now in concert with each other. At least I do this because it works for me. But the first thing is essentially getting your ebook to look like your children's book. And that means creating page breaks, making sure that the illustration on your ebook page is going to fit with the text. And then doing that so that there's very little difference between the paperback version of it and the ebook version of it. So in using the programs that I did, I was able to teach myself ultimately how to create and edit an ebook. So as I was doing that for her as well, we went through KDP, which is Amazon's site for Kindle. And simultaneously, while setting up the book on CreateSpace, I was setting up the book on the Kindle site as well. That led to another option, which, again, it's truly author preference and how widely they want their ebook distributed. In this case, you can go with Kindle Direct Publishing Select, which kind of makes your ebook exclusive to Kindle. That opens up some options for you as far as potential royalties coming from people who are using who are reading your book online. They're a part of the Kindle Unlimited program where they can essentially get ebooks for free. But if you're a part of Kindle Direct, then you would get some royalties off of that. So you can choose to be part of that, or you can choose to go with multiple platforms. So there's Nook, there's Kobo, there's Page Foundry. There's a lot of other options for the different types of readers that are out there. So if they're going to go with that, then I would do an ebook setup in both Kindle, but also use Draft to Digital, which is what I found to be a great option, as they sort of represent all of those other formats that you can put an ebook in.
So you think it's worth the 10% that Draft to Digital takes in order for them to put it wide for you?
Me personally, I started off with both because I just wanted as wide an option as I possibly could for anybody who had any kind of device. But part of me also wanted to test out this Kindle program to see. So while I stopped actively promoting on the others, I decided to go ahead and give this Kindle program a try. And so as I work with clients, that's kind of the thing I would stress to them, is that this is completely your choice, and you aren't locked into any term, you aren't locked into contracts or anything. You have the ability to experiment with this and find out really what works for you. If you really want to target your audience to Kindle users, anyone who's got a Kindle out there is going to be, can use hashtag Kindle or things like that. They're going to be looking for available books on Kindle. So as an author, that's just kind of a decision you have to make. And I go into this with clients trying to just throw out all of the facts, not come in there with any sort of prejudged notion based on my experience. But I was like, whatever's going to work for you. You may end up having 200 friends that have Nook, and they're going to want your book on Nook. So it's all based on what your situation is.
Right, but do you find so there's other wide distribution platforms besides Draft to Digital, and Draft to Digital takes 10% of the revenue that they make in return for putting you wide. And I was just wondering, do you think Draft to Digital is worth that 10% that they take?
I don't really have a hardcore opinion on that. It really, no. 10% seems a bit steep for an ebook, but I also didn't go much further beyond Draft to Digital. So it's probably incumbent upon me to go out there and see, especially if I'm going to be relaying this information to clients, what other options are there out there? Just much like the CreateSpace versus Ingram Spark conversation. What are the pros and cons? What is Draft to Digital going to do for you that these other platforms aren't? What's the benefit to each?
Well, there's also the ability to go right into Kindle, into KDP, and do a paperback on KDP, which has its own advantages as well.
Right.
So there's a third option, and even though you can't buy the book wholesale on KDP, it does go to all of the rest of your numbers. So CreateSpace doesn't. When you go to CreateSpace or Ingram Spark, it doesn't count towards your ranking anywhere. But because Kindle because Kindle is publishing that book, it actually counts towards your rank and your Kindle, and everything inside of the Kindle store is self-contained. So where you can't buy a book for, let's say, $3, it does help your rank if someone buys the paperback, as opposed to when you're on Kindle Spark, or Ingram Spark, it doesn't do anything. It's its own platform.
Right.
So I mean, there's just a lot of different options. Can you talk about how you evolved into becoming a book architect?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, back in 2014, when I first kind of conceived my idea for my children's book, that kind of set me down a path of learning the self-publishing industry. So I made that early decision that I wanted to self-publish, and my thought process behind that, and this will be an example of how one story can kind of stick with you as you kind of make decisions in your own sort of career or your passions or whatever. But I was friends with a guy in this group that I was volunteering for in the Project Management Institute, and he and a partner had put out a book through a publishing company several years prior. And that publishing company decided they're going to stop printing that book and stop making that book available. So to get that book back, because they wanted to re-release it through their own company now, they had to pay a significant amount of money. Now, back then, like I said, that was several years before I got into it. But as I started to approach, my attempts at writing and kind of coming up with a story, that sort of tilted me towards looking into self-publishing. Another thought I had in my head is, I wonder how many, and you can postulate on this after I talk about my sort of journey here, but how many potential authors who had a great story and a great vision that got shot down by publishing companies never proceeded to get their work out there. So that's just a kind of a thought for later. But as I kind of put my first book together, I'd written a story, much like Alexandria had done. I had written my story. It was a cute story about my really starring three of my kids and a magical stuffed animal. My daughter, who was 9 at the time, just as a stuffed animal lover, and she had this one in particular that she named Lisa. And it was just always an ever-present stuffed animal with her, and she kind of treated Lisa like she was a living creature and so forth, and talking to her, playing games with her, and stuff like that. So that sort of set the idea in motion as far as the characters. Now, the other thing you're going to get to know about me as we keep talking here is that I am a complete travel nut. And I love everything about travel. It's one of my biggest passions in life. I got started with it at a very, very young age. And it's just a childhood thing that really stuck with me through to this day. So those sort of inspirations and influences combined led me to conceive the general layout and story of the book, which is, three of my kids, the magical stuffed animal, and locations around the world. So I started my story in England. So I wrote the text not knowing anything about the format of how a children's book should be done, not knowing how many pages it should be, not really at that point even knowing what platforms were the best. So that first book, I just learned, and I did a lot of research. I got knowledgeable about, this is how many pages a typical book should be. I sought out illustrators, maybe didn't spend as long as I should have on the illustrator, but I lucked into a really, really good one right off the bat. And so as that first book came together, and I learned about ISBNs, and I learned about copywriting and things like that. Yeah, that kind of stuck with me as I went into the second book. And so that process for me became a lot easier. I knew exactly how to write the story. I knew exactly how to write up the designs for the illustrations. grabbed my ISBNs, did my copyright, and got it out. By the time the third book rolled around, it became much simpler. So I evolved my own process to the point where this was so repeatable that I was going to, really kind of offer my help for others. And the last piece of it was just understanding some of those tools to get the ebooks made and to format the text in the book and things like that. So that's been kind of my evolution. I really just sort of used myself as the guinea pig to perfect the process, but felt confident and comfortable enough to offer this out to others. And on occasion, I've seen others that sort of offer the same thing. So, I try to make myself, as hands-on with the author as I possibly can, talking them through everything. So, they can either choose to come back to me again, or they've got it themselves as they, consider a second book and beyond.
Cool. So when somebody is thinking about starting their book, but they're not sure if they should traditionally publish or self-publish, what kinds of things would you tell them to consider before they made a decision of whether to try the traditional or the self-publishing route?
Yeah. And again, I walk into this discussion with absolutely no bias either way. So I would think with traditional publishers, what I would say, if that's the route that they want to go, is really to do a lot of research into the submission requirements for these publishing companies, look at their process, look at other books that they've published, look at illustrators maybe that they work with, just kind of get to know it. And if you're gonna, submit it, don't just do a one and done. Find multiple that think might be a good fit, but just look at their submission requirements carefully and make sure that you're buttoned up before you submit this off to them. Because I personally don't have the experience with a traditional publishing company, but I think where it comes to things like marketing and production of the book, and even providing illustrators that would work well, there's a lot of advantages to using them. On the self-publishing side, I would say that while you craft the vision, you really control it, be careful that your book again is very, very buttoned up. Editing, get it. Do a lot of sort of testing your book with the market, and get some beta readers, and just some of those things that you're going to want to make sure of. You're not releasing a book that's obviously got errors or grammatical errors or things like that. So if you're going to self-publish, you got to really be buttoned up where that's concerned. That being said, that really offers you full control over your book and your vision. And that's a pretty powerful thing for an artist to hear, to have control. You hear sometimes past bands wanting control over their music and stuff like that. So it's just, if it's something that you're creating or it's your vision or something like that, it's a powerful thought to know that you control the process and you control the direction of your art.
Absolutely. I agree with that statement wholeheartedly. And I suppose what I want to talk about is actually launching this book and getting people to buy it, because I don't know much about kids' books. I've done 2, and they have not been the most successful launches of my career. Yep. So could you talk a little bit about convincing people to buy your children's book? Because what I found is that you have to have, when it's an adult book, you're having a conversation with the buyer. But with a children's book, you just have too many conversations and too many things to go wrong. So could you talk a little bit about convincing people to buy a children's book and what goes into it?
Yeah, and we preface this by saying there's a lot of competition where children's books are concerned, and a lot of different topics that can be covered. And it's preparing something for a launch and things like that. I think it really boils down to, and this is an area where, I myself have room to grow, and that's understanding the marketing side of it. What makes your book unique, and what story can you tell, and how can you make your book stand apart from any other book that people can go out there and buy? What's your unique story? What's your message, and things like that? So it's getting the word out ahead of time, as far as trying to create some general excitement about your book. And I think there's a kind of a running joke that your friends and family are probably going to be some of your worst customers, because I think your expectation is going to be high and you're going to be disappointed. But go into this understanding that not everybody is going to want to read a kid's book if they don't have kids, or if their kids are grown up, or things like that. So, it depends on what kind of network you've already built. So if I could go back and do things differently, because, my first book, when that went out, that's actually been my most successful. It's the ones that have followed that, it's really kind of how much word can you get out, and how can you get yourself out there, and, to book shows and things like that, and, sort of organically grow and get the word out there. A lot of that is based on how much time the author has to really commit to it. And so everybody's situation is different, and everybody's sort of, network is different. How many people are going to advocate on their behalf? How many people are going to, champion their book and things like that? And then, do you get a publicist? What do you invest in, and how much do you invest in just trying to get book sales for your book? Again, and you have to know this with, having put children's books out there, you're going to make but so much on every book sale. So it's, if you sell a handful, that's great. But, to really make it worth your while, you got to be up there in the thousands to start seeing some sort of real solid benefit from the creation of the book.
Yeah. I like the thing you said about your parents and family and friends being your worst customers, because, they're not all going to buy your book, and then you're going to get bummed out that not everyone buys your book. But the truth is, almost everybody that sells a book, that launches a book, will sell less than 100 copies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I if you could go back and tell you one thing to make sure you sell more than 100 copies, or three things to make sure to have your best launch ever, that first book, what would you tell yourself? Three things that you've learned so far.
So I would definitely get the word out. I would understand myself more as a brand. I would flesh out the story. I would really focus on the characters, especially the main character of the book, which is the stuffed animal, Lisa. I would have branded Lisa right away. I just went through a process where, to give the book series a consistent name, because, I've got Lisa Goes to England, Lisa Goes to France, Lisa Goes to Australia. And the key thing about this Lisa character is that she's a stuffed animal who can come to life and transform into anything. And so this is always, the different quality in each book is that Lisa has transformed herself into something different. So I would have tried to have built a community around this character before I even launched the first book, and just tried to generate some excitement around, hey, this is what I feel is going to be a unique character in children's book lore. Try to create something that's iconic, that kids can relate to and get excited about, because, little kids for this target age group, which for these books is, 4 to 8, there's a lot of them have stuffed animals. All of my kids did. So I would imagine that that's such a booming industry that everyone can relate. And, what more when your stuffed animal can come to life and go on adventures with you. So if I could go back and just prepare, I think, that first launch months in advance by creating some buzz around this character and, maybe even starting her own Facebook page and starting her own Instagram page and things like that to get people interested, to start to tell a story, to even lay some background as to what the character was. That's what I would go back and do differently, just to see, with a potential built-in audience, how well would that first book have gone, and then how well would the subsequent books have gone if I already had an audience built in who wanted to hear that next or wanted to read that next adventure, to see what Lisa turned into in the next country, wherever that country or city was that they're going to next. So just kind of creating that buzz. And there's always, at the end of this book, a hint towards the next adventure and things like that. So that's the kind of thing I would do. So I was even advising Alexandria about it. She's got a main character in her book, which is a cow named Star. And I said, hey, this is your main character. This is the one that, is kind of the star of your book. And even going so far, and this is something I just did recently, and probably should have done it with the first book, but I was kind of waiting to see how far I got into this. Have a stuffed animal made or something like that. I actually went through Budsies and had a stuffed animal of Lisa in her original form, the prototype made. And, it's those kind of additions that if I went to a book show that, I was trying to sell this first book, but I also had some swag to go along with it, like the stuffed animal already created or something like that. It's stuff like that I probably could have launched myself maybe a little faster.
Awesome. I always say that launching is pre-launching, so once you hit that launch button, it's basically you've already won or lost. Yep. All right, so we need to work towards wrapping up. What do you have coming up? What is your next project that you're working on?
Sure. So in addition to the Amazing Lisa book series, I also have a book series about my daughter Rhythm. And this is a book series called Rhythm's World. And it's just Rhythm doing various things really targeted towards a 1 to 4 age group. This is a little more basic, a little simpler. So I'm running that series along with the Amazing Lisa series. So I've got 2 books in process for that. The next Amazing Lisa book is going to be Lisa Goes to India. So I'm currently having that book illustrated. I wrote the story, came up with all the requirements, and so I'm getting that set. Hopefully should be out. I was trying to target before Christmas, but not sure how realistic that is. I think I might want to focus on the ones that I have out already leading up to Christmas. And then the next book starring Rhythm is going to be a series of books, and it's called Rhythm's World Tour. So again, you can see the travel element really coming out here, but it's just going to be sort of a book to teach kids about different places and starting with North America. So I picked out several landmarks in across Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and that's going to kind of be the theme of that book with Rhythm in all of these places. I'm considering going to doing an interactive blog based on another book that I wrote, a full-length book that I may turn into a blog series instead called Diary of a Travel Man, and that would be my opportunity really to connect with people who travel as a passion just like me, all the while engaging my writing and things like that. And then I had a novel that I wrote back in 2014 as well. It's called Vacationer, and this is a book that I conceived while lying on a beach in French Polynesia. It's just one of those things. I'm not sure if it's because I was so relaxed or just loved the scenery and background of French Polynesia, but the story just hit me that was really focused on French Polynesia. So that book right now is in developmental edit, and I'm targeting that next year. So I got to think of myself as I go through all these projects and the various versions of myself. There's the children's book author, there's the novelist, there's the book architect, the blogger. So it's all a matter of just trying to come into my own with my own brand, and so that's sort of my task for the remainder of this year as I really try to launch a huge 2018, trying to make that the difference maker of the year.
Awesome. And why should this is where I let you pitch yourself, and why should people work with you if they have a book?
So, having gained the knowledge of the process, from soup to nuts, I can be there for you. If you've written your story, even if you haven't written your story, I'm really hands-on. Like I said, I have empathy. I've been through this process. I've had a vision that I wanted to see come to life. I can put myself in their shoes. So as you work with me, you're going to find somebody who's just as excited as you are about getting your book out there, because I know the feeling, and it's to see something that you've created or that started off as a vision. It's just one of the greatest things in the world. So you're going to find somebody in me who's engaged, who's going to get you immediate feedback, immediate answers to your questions, is going to tell you in detail what the next steps are, and work with you to make sure that it's exactly how you want your book to be, so that the product that you can take out and, again, market however you're going to want, that you're proud of it, and that you're happy that you've worked with me.
Awesome. And now, as the last couple of things, this is when the people that have been tuned out drawing and writing come back, and they listen to you for the next few minutes or a few seconds, and you impart to them the one thing you want them to take away from this today. It can be something you've already said, or something that you haven't said yet, but what piece of advice do you want them to remember as they leave this conversation?
Sure. So if you have a vision, if you got something that's stuck in your head that maybe you aren't quite sure how to get it out, how to make it happen. And, I'm speaking to children's book authors, or if you want to write a novel or something like that, is just do it. Your vision, it's something special to you. It's something that's going to make a difference in your life if you see that come to life. So you have a message, you have a story, you have a character, you have a vision, you have something that's educational, you have something that's entertaining. Get it out there. There's never been a time probably where you've had more opportunity to get your work, your vision, your art into the marketplace to be discovered, and you never know what it could lead to. You never know who's going to stumble upon it. You never know who's going to get behind you. It could be a life changer, and it's because you took the steps to make it happen.
Awesome. And finally, where can we find you online?
Sure. So my website is patrickadamsbooks.com. I have a couple of Facebook pages. I have a regular page, but I also can be found at Patrick Adams Books. That's my main business Facebook page. I also have a Facebook page called The World of Rhythm, which is dedicated to the books and the blog about my daughter. On Twitter, I am at Pat Adams Books, and on Instagram, I am Patrick_Adams_books.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. So that was my episode with Patrick Adams. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go find him online and tell him so. Also, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on iTunes. Check out my new nonfiction book at GoSellYourSoul.com and my new Kickstarter, Pixie Dust, at PixieDustComic.com. Have a great day, wannabes and creators. I will see you next time.